A long line snaked through Bell's Market that afternoon, and Jarvis Turner, a quiet man in khakis and a navy polo, stood at the very end, his arms folded and a patient smile on his face as the cashier rang up one order after another. But then she walked in Karen. She strutted in like she owned the place, expensive sunglasses perched on her nose, a purse that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a look at her eyes that said she was used to getting what she wanted. She scanned the line, scoffed, rolled her eyes, and with a huff, she marched straight to the front of the line, cutting off an elderly woman, clutching a carton of milk. The whole line went silent. Even the cashier's hands began to tremble as Karen planted herself there like she was entitled to be first. Jarvis watched her quietly, his expression calm but firm. He cleared his throat and spoke in a low voice. "Ma'am, the line starts back here." But Karen snapped her head around, her eyes cold as ice. She sneered, "Oh, please, I don't have time to stand around like you people do. I'm in a rush, so mind your business." Jarvis didn't flinch. He kept his voice steady. "We're all waiting, ma'am. It's only fair." She let out a shrill laugh. "Fair," she scoffed. "I don't have time for fair. I'm important, unlike you." Jarvis stood a little taller, his gentle smile gone, his eyes steady as he replied, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move to the back of the line." Karen's face turned red. "Who do you think you are?" she barked, her voice sharp with entitlement. Jarvis took a breath and said calmly, "I'm the owner of the store." The whole line fell into stunned silence. Karen's mouth dropped open. The cashier froze, her eyes wide as Jarvis continued, "My name is Jarvis Turner, and I own Bell's Market, my store. Everyone waits their turn. Everyone gets treated with respect. No exceptions." Karen's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. The line was watching. The elderly woman clutched her milk, and Jarvis gave her a small, reassuring nod. Karen's shoulders slumped. She muttered an apology, her voice barely audible. As she moved to the back of the line, head down, Jarvis turned to the elderly woman, took her milk, and placed it gently on the counter. "On the house, ma'am," he said softly. "Thank you for your patience." She gave him a smile, her eyes wet with relief. The rest of the line seemed to stand a little taller as Jarvis turned back to face him, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of every unspoken lesson. "Remember," he said, "you never know who you're talking to or who's watching." Karen's eyes darted nervously around the store. As the whispers started, she thought it was over, but Jarvis had only just begun, because some lessons run deeper than a checkout line, and as she would soon learn, the consequences were only just beginning to unfold, because next time she wouldn't just be dealing with Jarvis Turner, the store owner. She'd be facing Jarvis Turner, the man who never forgets how you treat people. The next morning dawned bright and cold, and the air at Bell's Market was thick with whispers. Folks talked in hushed tones about what had happened the day before, how Karen had cut the line, how she'd been put in her place by Jarvis Turner, the owner himself. Karen showed up again, but this time she didn't march to the front of the line. She hovered by the entrance, her shoulders hunched, her eyes downcast, clutching a shopping basket like it was a lifeline. Jarvis was already there, stocking the shelves, his movements calm, his face unreadable. When Karen finally approached him, her voice was small. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes flicking up to meet his. "I didn't know who you were." Jarvis looked at her for a long moment, his expression steady. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said softly. "It matters how you treat people." Karen swallowed hard, her eyes darting away. "I know," she whispered. "I was wrong." Jarvis nodded slowly. "I believe everyone deserves a second chance," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But that chance comes with respect." Karen nodded, her lips pressed tight around the words. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. Jarvis offered her a small smile. "No problem, ma'am," he said. But as Karen turned to leave, she paused, her shoulders stiffened, and she looked back at Jarvis, her eyes no longer humble, but calculating. "You think you're so special," she hissed. "I got friends in high places," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You think this is over, but it's not." Jarvis raised an eyebrow, the calm in his face replaced by a glint of steel in his eyes. "I know it's not," he said, his voice low and certain. "But remember this." He leaned in just a bit, his words soft, but echoing like a promise. "You started this, but I'll finish it." Karen's mouth twitched, her mask of polite apology cracking for just a moment before she turned on her heel and stalked away. And as the door closed behind her, Jarvis stood there for a moment, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes burning with something deeper. The store was quiet, but in that silence, Jarvis knew this wasn't just about a line anymore. It was about pride, respect, and the simple fact that in his store, his life, he would never let someone else write his story, because this wasn't just the end of an argument. It was the beginning of a reckoning, and he was ready to finish what she had started. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter, and let's keep the conversation going.